So today we're going to discuss about intent filters and resolution. So which is the only topic left for this first part of this module, intent. And then we will move on to looking at first the internet resources, and then later on we will see the broadcast receiver. So already we have done the discussion related to intent, the objects, and what are the types of intents, the different intent methods, and we saw few example also. So and some point we have also discussed about intent filters and resolution, but today we're going to look just with more and more example of it. So first of all, what is an intent filter? So we can say that it's like a process, okay, which Android system uses to identify the or to resolve the the intent part, okay, to identify the Android component which will be used to perform the desired intent, or maybe you say that whatever the application has generated the intent. So in order to satisfy the action for that intent, so Android system will going to follow this process. So we can say that it's a way for Android component to declare the capability. So every component that are there inside the application, they will have this tag inside their manifest file, which will going to declare the capability in the form of category action, and that will let the other system, or that will let the Android system to understand what are the different capabilities of that component. Okay, so which can alternatively we say that it defines the kind of an intent that an Android component can receive on itself. So suppose if you have written an application, and if that application is capable of performing some action like calling some numbers, or maybe reading the contacts or viewing the contacts, or maybe opening the web content and displaying it in its own application. So if these components are able to do so, then they declare this all things inside the intent filter. And then the resolutions takes place, which compares the content of the intent object. So suppose if there's any primary activity which has initiated or invoked the intent object, so that intent object would already be prepared with having the action category, or maybe the data or action pair in it. So then the system will try to search for the suitable component that can be match against the given intent, okay, and match against the intent filter of all the already declared components. So basically, or you can say technically, it looks for the whenever there is an intent has been invoked by any of the application, your Android system looks for the manifest file, okay, for inside the system or inside the device for all the applications manifest file, which has the best capability to fulfill that kind of a intent object, and then it shows the list of options for us. So that's how we get to see, when we share any kind of data in our mobile phone, so we get list of applications available, and we choose one of that application and then perform our task, okay. So when the resolutions takes place, so Android system uses this following information which is already being given inside the intent object to map to the appropriate Android component. So resolution need this information. So if your intent is carrying the action, the type, or maybe the data type and the URI of the data, or the category, then looking into this combinations or this information, your Android system would be then able to locate the desired Android component, which has its capability declared by saying that I am the one who can fulfill this task. So where it has been declared inside the intent filter. So this is how you can see an example of the Android manifest file, where you get to see this inclusion of intent filter tag. Okay, so generally, our any manifest file, it declares the component. So activity is one of the component, and inside the activity, what you can see now is the intent filter. Okay, and this activity, okay, is capable of performing three different capability. Why? Because you can see there are three different intent filters going inside this activity tag. So one is the first intent filter, which means which is of type main. Okay, so its action is of type main and category is launcher. Second intent is it is having multiple actions, like it can view, it can edit, it can pick, and the name of category is default. And the mime type is also given here, which is you can see that. So any activity or any application who is intending to view the application or the data which is of type Google Node, so that will get resolved to this corresponding activity with the name as nodes list. Okay, so basically this activity is nothing but a nodes list. So you can just imagine that this would be a Google Note list. Okay, so this note list would be able to perform this sort of capabilities. So first being that it is a main and the launcher activity, which means that on your device there would be an icon for this application, and tapping onto that will lead to your main activity. Okay, so that's the main entry point of your application. Another capability is that, so that which means that user can launch this application. Okay, and its icon, launcher icon, would be found inside the home screen. And next is the another capability which says that it can view, edit, and pick. Okay, what it can do, or on which data type it can do, on the node data type, and it is the default one. So whenever any other application, okay, is trying to open the Google Note of data, okay, and every time this will get resolved to this activity or this application is only note list. Why? Because the category has been mentioned as default, and the type of action that you can perform is, first of all, you can view. So probably you may find the list of all the nodes, okay, inside this activity class, and you can perform the action to view, you can perform the action to pick any of the node and edit. Okay, and for this kind of action that you want to perform, the default app would be the Google Notes app. So whenever you are into some other application and you're trying to work with this Google Note or any of the nodes which is of type Google Note, then what will happen, this application will get invoked. Okay, and needless to say that it will going to be of form implicit intent. Okay, because we are looking at the resolution part, which is to be carried out by the Android system. So Android system will going to look upon these pieces of information in order to do the resolution of which component need to be called in order to perform these actions. Now what is the third capability? Third capability is to get the content. Okay, so what is the actual, so we can view the list, and we can, once we tap on any of the node list, then we should be able to get its content also. So for that also, this has been declared as a default component, so which means that there are no other applications going to get open when you have this Google Note. So with Google Note you can open. If it had been mentioned as alternative, okay, instead of category as default, if it had been mentioned as alternative, then what will happen, so user may get multiple applications options inside the app list, which gets opened while opening the Google Notes. Okay, so if it is alternative, then you may find the other applications as well, or this can appear into the category of the like the list of options that user can choose from. If it is default, then by default it will get open with the note list. So that is how any component will first going to declare its capabilities. So likewise, if suppose you are writing any application and you want your application to exhibit this capability, like my application would be able to work on the contact data, and while working on the contact data, it would be able to view the contact, edit the contact, and pick the contact. So you will first going to designate a class which will going to, or activity which is going to perform this kind of interaction, and inside that you would going to include the intent filter tag. Okay, so I hope it is understood what is intent filter. Yes, is it understood or any doubt? Yes, student, is it understood? Am I audible or not? Okay, let's go ahead. So this here you can see the same capabilities being explained. So when resolution takes place, so these are the actual resolution that will happen. So when it sees Android system, that action is main category is launcher, which means that it's the actual intent used by the launcher to populate its top level list. And when it is view and the data is the any nodes data, then it will going to display all the nodes under this URI, so which user can browse through and see. If it is pick, then it provides the list of node under this URI from which user can pick a node whose data URL is returned back to the caller activity. So probably you can think of here, like we may be making use of on start activity for result and on activity result, because we are returning the list of the node which has been picked by the user, so that to the caller activity that can be displayed. Okay, so we will be returning it back to the caller activity, just like how we have seen the example of contacts application. So with this, we have completed the first part of our third module, that is intent. So you may say that intent will going to be there in your UT syllabus. Okay, so now we will going to touch upon this small topic, that is internet resources, which basically deals with how to make use of internet services inside your application. Okay, so I'm not going with the broadcast receiver now because it will going to take time, so I may not be able to include it inside the unit test, whereas internet services part that can be easily added into the current portion. So I'll just switch over to the next slide where we'll discuss everything related to internet resources. I hope screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am, it's
Okay.
visible.
Okay, thank you, Arfa. So for this internet resources, we will be looking upon the different steps of how we can make an internet call inside our application, or rather we can say how we can make use of internet services in our application. Okay, so this other step basically we can say. So first we have to set up an internet connection, then identify the state of internet connection, whether it's established, connected or not, or maybe if you are having any problem. Then once we have got successful connection, then we perform several network operations like downloading the data or fetching some HTML content. So we will look upon on slide the example of having some HTML content being fetched, and in order to achieve all this functionality, we'll be making use of HTTP URL connection class. And I should not say that you know this something related to, I mean, in HTTP URL connection is something related to Java only, so there's no surprise if you come again to this class or this method, because the same thing, same package is going to be utilized here. Okay, but slightly in a different manner, so we'll going to look at that part also. So first job, as a developer, that we're going to do first is to set up the internet uh, connection. So how we will going to do that? Okay, so as I said, the internet is like a kind of a service, okay, which always runs and it doesn't carry any sort of UI, but this is a service which is commonly provided to all the application which the application who needs this kind of an internet services. So they're going to invoke a class which is called as a connectivity manager class. Okay, so there are also different types of connections, like you can make use of maybe the private connection, or maybe you can say the LAN or the WAN connections. Okay, so if you are intending to connect to the local network that you have, so you may go with this connectivity manager class. Okay, so the way to invoke or initialize this manager class is we make use of this context dot get system service method. Okay, so basically what will happen is this method which is responsible for invoking the different services which are available into your system. So just remember, whenever we will going to work with any of the services that Android provides, okay, commonly to the application, in that case we will going to work with the get system services, because these are the system services. Okay, so this method will going to help us by mentioning what type of services. So in bracket we mention context dot connectivity services. Okay, so this is like a string constant which is indicating what type of a service it is. Okay, so we make use of connectivity service to make the auto set up the internet connection. Okay, and then once this code or once this connection class, connectivity manager class is in a you can say instantiated, then we can perform the next step. Okay, so we have likewise, like for internet we have connectivity manager class, so we also have like another manager classes like download manager class, or which specifically work like a download services. Okay, so likewise we may see in our later sessions like how many such manager class and system services we can make use of. So this is one of the first one that we are looking at. So once we have got the connection established, okay, we have got the system services with the connectivity service. Next is to check the network information, because first of all we should not be getting, it may not happen that in the very first attempt you're getting the internet connection successful. So in that case, what you have to do, you have to find out what is the state of your network connection. So to do that, we have to first get all the network information, which can be obtained by calling this method get all network info. And this method can be called with the object that we have initialized in the previous step. Okay, which is the object of connectivity manager class. Okay, so this class is already, I mean, this object is already tied to this service, internet service. So this will going to get us all the network information. Okay, so it will going to return the network information in the form of an array. So we have to, and the type of that array is network info. So we have to receive it inside network info array. And then we go by checking the connectivity, or you can say the state, connected state of the network, whether it is connected or not. So we have to iterate over this array. Okay, and we have to get the state, okay, of our internet connection, whether it is successful or not. So now we may use this array object to get this state, and we'll compare this state whether it is connected or not. So because when you are trying to, if you have a very stable connection, then it is fine. But when you're trying to connect, and it sometimes happens that you sometimes get the connected state, connecting state, or disconnected state. So you may have these several values going inside this array. So you may try to get a one which says connected. Okay, and if that match is found, then you say that internet is connected, or you may directly start performing some action. Okay, so what kind of an action you may perform once you have got the status connected? So as I said, depending upon what is your actual internet state, you may have different states. So this state can list, or you can say it can return you the different states. So it could be connected, connecting, disconnected, disconnecting, suspended, or unknown. Okay, so depending upon the status, you may carry out your intended action. Okay, next is once we are sure that we have got the internet connection state successfully connected, then we perform the network operation. So what kind of a network operation you may perform? So let us say that you want to fetch the HTML content of a website from a given URL. So in that case, you have to work with the HTTP URL connection class, okay, and URL class. So both will going to come together to fulfill this task of fetching the content from a website. So this URL could be the URL of an HTML page, or it could be the URL for any of the internet resource, like for example, downloading of some image. Okay, so that this URL will then point to the image. Okay, so just for an example, we are looking at this dummy URL, you may say. So we'll create one string link pointing to this URL. We'll pass it to type URL, or we can say we will going to initialize a URL object. by passing this parameter link to it. And next we will going to invoke HTTP URL connection class, and we have to initialize it so that this object gets tied to this particular URL class, or you can say URL object. So basically HTTP URL connection expects the type of object to be used to initialize it is a URL object, so which we had already initialized here. So we would write like this: HTTP URL connection is equal to this type and URL dot open connection. So this method we will going to make use to open the connection to this URL. Okay, and then we will call a method uh, con dot connect. Okay, so like this class has different method. Okay, so one we are using is here, that is connect, which will going to connect to this URL, or you can say it will going to open the socket to this to this particular URL which is pointed to by this URL object. Okay, so next job, once we have connected to this URL, is to download this data or to fetch this HTML data. So for that, we will going to make use of input stream reader and or input stream or buffer reader together. So first we're going to initialize our input stream reader with this connection object by calling a method get input stream. So which will going to look upon the stream data which is going to come or which is going to be received from this URL. Okay, so this stream data we're going to again use to initialize a buffer reader object, because we need to later on get the data into this buffer reader object, and we have to append it into this string object. And while doing so, we may use some function for this reader class to check whether we had reached the end of line or not. So first we'll initialize this buffer reader object with this input stream reader object. So this input stream reader object name is is. Okay, and we'll provide some encoding, suitable encoding format, and then we would declare this string which will going to receive the you can say end result, or you can say the entire HTML data into one single string separated by, or you can say delimited by the new line. So we'll run a loop, we'll check whether this reader has reached the end of line or not, and accordingly we're going to just do the concatenation of data into this final, or you can say this is our result string. Okay, so it will going to read the data till it has not reached null, and it will keep on adding those data to this web page. And later on, our data, you can say, has been extracted or fetched inside the string web page, and now we can do any kind of action that we wanted to perform with this data. So here for simplicity we have seen that, or we are seeing that it's just the HTML URL, okay, which will going to fetch the HTML data of this URL. But this could be anything. It could be like an image also. So in that case, you may of course use the input stream reader, but image will also going to come into picture, or you may say the bitmap object will also going to come in picture, and you may use certain suitable view component or view element inside view object inside your UI class in Android to set it back to that image object. Okay, so as we saw one method of this HTTP URL connection to connect, there are several other methods that we may use or which may be required for us to use. That is disconnect, get request method, get response code. So this method, getters or setters. So setters you may use before you make a call to the connect method, and getters you may use once the connection has been established. Okay, and disconnect also. So disconnect method, as the name suggests, it will simply going to release the resources, or you may say release the connection itself. Whereas the other method that we have over here are the different getters, which helps us to get the type of the request method which has been used to establish the connection. So for example, whether it is get or post or something like that. Then response code is the code which gets returned by the remote server when you connect. So sometimes if the connection is successful, if it is not successful, so always you see, some error code is, or some code result code is attached to this HTTP status. Okay, connection status. So sometime you say page not found, 404 error, or some code which indicate that the connection is successful. So in that case, you may check, use this method to check what is the result code written or the response code written by the remote server. And before you establish a connection, if you want a specific method to be used, like for example get or post, then you use this method to set this request command, which will be sent to the remote HTTP server. Sometimes you may be intending to use a proxy server. Okay, so this method will going to return whether the connection has used any proxy server or not. So these are like optional, but depending upon your scenario, you may use one of this method. Okay, but these are not only this much method, there are also few more method, so which we may see. So next topic, as you have seen that it's a broadcast receiver, but I'm not going to get started with broadcast receiver today, maybe in the next session. So let us first have a look at this kind of an example, but with a slight difference that on the PPT it is given that on this slide that this link is pointing to the simple URL which will going to fetch the HTML data. But rather than fetching the HTML data, we will going to download some resource from internet using this HTTP URL connection class, URL class, and our manager class, that is connectivity manager. Okay, so I'll just share this again, share my screen with you so that we can look at the example. So this time, not recorded the demo for the coding part, but code is ready and it's little lengthy also. So, but not that much lengthy. And so I thought let us get to directly to the code part and explain how the code is. I mean, how the modules are connected. I hope you can see this emulator screen.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay, so as you can see this interface, what it's very simple. There is just one button. Actually, I should have changed the button caption to download, but that's fine. So here, what will happen once we click on this button? There would be one image which will get downloaded. So basically, this will make use of internet service to download an image from any remote server. Okay, and once the image has been downloaded, there's an image view which will going to get set with that image which has been downloaded. So we'll just click on this button. So you have seen that there was a progress bar also. Okay, I'll just do it once again. So the progress bar has launched. You have got the status is connected. Actually, it is very quick because the image is of PNG format, and here we had one image view. So after downloading this image, okay, so which is nothing but our college logo, so it has set it back to the image view. Okay, so you may assume that what would be the UI class. Okay, so it has one text view which is saying download image, and another text view which is saying welcome to. Then there would be one image view which will be initially having no src associated to it. Okay, so it's just a blank image view, and once we click on this button, so it has downloaded that image showing us the progress. So if suppose your image or if your data, whatever you're downloading, if it is of bit huge size, then the progress bar will at least be running for that amount of time. Okay, and here we have displayed one toast as soon as the button is clicked to get the status. So as we have seen on the slide, we need to know the status of our internet connection, whether it is connected or not, and once it is connected, so this is just like we are doing testing of our internet connection. Okay, so first let us have a look at the XML part of it. So as I told already, what are the views we had used? So we had to use relative layout here. Okay. So for this, there's one text view which says downloading image. For this, there's another maybe text view. It is getting slow. So for this, another text view which is saying welcome to, and here we have actually this image view. Okay, so this image view is not given any source to it, so that will get set during runtime. And here is our button. Okay, so the button name should have been some meaningful name. Okay, download something like that. Download image. So code UI part is very simple. We'll just look at the actual Java part. Okay. So as you can see that we have here few methods like on create, some user defined method, download image, and something known as handler. We'll later look at what it is. And then one more user defined method called check internet connection, and one lifecycle callback on destroy. So first what we did, all the objects that we had already, I mean that we will be using throughout our code. So we had already, while writing it, declared it on the same line, but then we shifted above, as you see, the same object is being used by some other functions as well. So we had shifted it up so that its access can be given to all. Okay, so first let us have a look at on create method. So which is very simple. So first is our super implementation. Second is our set content view. Okay. Next is this button initialization, which is only one button throughout we have on our UI. And next is uh, attaching the listener. Okay. So now this listener, or you can say this method, void on click, it's just calling two different method. Okay, so first is check internet connection, second is download image. And this download image is a function which is accepting the or it is pointing to the URL which is having the SIS logo in it. Okay, so this I fetched from our college website only. So these are the two user-defined method we wrote, which will go inside this button click event. So before we go and download this image, we would first like to see whether our internet connection has got established or not. So we wrote one user-defined method wherein we perform, all these steps like first connectivity manager class, and then identifying the state and checking whether the state is connected or not, and thereby showing this message like connected. Okay, this toast message. Okay, so let us first have a look at the very first method, this method that is check internet connection, how it is written and what are the content. Okay, so here is our method that is check internet connection. Okay, so what this method is doing, so as you can see, first step that we discussed on slide is to get the connectivity manager object to check the connection, or to first tie it to the service, that is connectivity service, which is nothing but this first step. Okay, this code, this line of code, so you can see the same line of code is written here. Connectivity manager equal to connectivity manager get system service get base context dot connectivity services. Next is you have to find out the connectivity status. Okay, whether it is successful or not, and that we can do with the help of this get all network info, okay, method, and getting it inside the array. So this actually two step is combined here, you can see. So we had called directly here connection dot get network info. Okay, and get state, so dot get state, together we called this two method in one single line. So get network info and get state. Okay, so this way also you can do. Okay, so basically what is the difference? Get all network info, you will going to return you the list of array, which will not only going to have the state information but also the other information of your internet connectivity, like the type of connection, whether it is Wi-Fi or LAN or maybe some other type of information, but we are not interested into looking onto those. So we just go with the network, get network info, and we directly checked upon this two element of array, that is the zeroth and the first one, and we are calling a method get state and checking whether it is equal to the connected or not. Okay, so you can go by comparing it against this two string constant. One is android.net.network info. Okay, and one is android.net.network info state dot connecting. So one is connected, another one is connecting. So as I said, it may take a little bit of time for your internet connection to get established. So you may check upon what is the actual state of connection, and depending upon that, you may fire some toast message as a part of testing whether your internet has got connected or not. And later on, you may also go upon the another element where you may get successfully your internet connection done, So again, you can check upon whether it is getting connected or it has got connected, and just fire this toast message. And at the end, what we are doing is we are, once the connection is successful or not, depending upon that, we are returning some flag. Okay, so this prototype, you can see how it is private boolean and then the name of function. Basically, if a connection is successful, return true. If it is not, then return false. So now you can look at the code of how the not internet connected state is captured, and it is fired in the toast. Or otherwise, it will by default will going to always return false. Okay, so once this connection step is made and the state is identified, next we're going to download the image. So this is just a function being called. So if this return value of this function is true, then this download image will be called, you may say. So now we will going to see what download image is all about. So download image is pointing to one JPEG image like here, which is our SS logo. So we can see that we have passed the URL string. So that URL string is shown in the prototype, and it is returning nothing. Okay, in turn. So though it should return something. Okay, the image that it has downloaded and it has set. Okay, but we have not done it like that. Rather, we had used another concept, like we call it as a handler class, in order to do this job of setting the downloaded image back to the image view. So as you can see here, this is one handler class is written over here. Okay, and its inline definition is provided. So wherein we are first calling this you can say method handle message, which is like a callback method. So first you have to make a call to its super implementation. So assume that this download image would be running one thread. Okay, and this handler is tied to that thread, which will going to look upon what message or what data has been written by that thread. So the data which is written by thread is pointed to by this message object. Okay, so first we're going to make a super call to this method by passing this message object, and secondly what we're going to do is we're going to fetch the message, or you can say the which is data which is carried inside this message. So what data is carried inside this message is some image which has been sent like a parsable data. Okay, so here we need to call a method message dot get data dot get parselable, and the data which has been passed is also assigned some key to it. Okay, so this is just like how we do the explicit intent part. Okay, so when we send some data from one activity to another activity, we put some key to it so that the receiving activity can get the data from the key. So assume that this is the same kind of a thing we are doing here. Okay, and what exception is that since this is a raw data which is of image data, so it has to get mapped to the corresponding destination type data, that is a bitmap, because we need to set it back to our image view. So we have declared, or you can say we have initialize our image view here. Okay, and we call a method set image bitmap, and it has set the downloaded data which is of form bitmap to this image view. Okay, and we had also shown one dialog progress dialog box, so which we are dismissing off, because now once the image has been set, there's no need for this dialog box to run. Okay, so now first let us have a look at how this download image is downloading the data inside some thread. Okay, so before we begin downloading, we are initializing this progress bar. So the way to initialize the progress bar is to declare the object which is of type progress dialog. Okay, so you may use the progress bar inside your application like this. So you may say progress dialog dot show. So just like we have a toast dot show, so same way we can say progress dialog dot show, passing the first parameter as context. Second, if you want to give any title you would like to give, otherwise you leave it blank. Then some message. So you might have seen that when we clicked, there is a message downloading image from the given URL. So we appended the URL at the end. Okay, so the URL which we had received from this download image function, okay, from here is getting stored inside some another string. Okay, that is URL string. Okay, so now onwards we'll be working with this URL string. So what we basically did here now inside this function is we created one thread. Okay, and we made that thread to download the data, pass the data into passable data, and attach that data to this message queue object. So basically when we are designing an application which is like an Android app, So here we don't do anything, being in a foreground. Like we don't perform the job directly being inside in on create or inside. So if your job is a long running job like downloading the image like here, so though here the image, this is very small image, but assume that if you have a very huge data to be downloaded, so we don't do it directly in the foreground process or in the on create method, or you may say in any of this method. Rather what we do is, inside some user defined method, you may create one thread, and what you will do, you will receive the user interaction. So what user want to download the image. So you will get the user input, and you will assign this task to some thread which will work like in a background. Okay. And why it is so? So that if this UI has some other job also to be carried out, which requires the user interaction, so it may not block it. Okay. So why? Because if this, if I click on this button and if this progress bar takes so long to complete, so what will happen? My activity will go into the pause state, and I may have to wait for this progress bar to get complete and get to see this data. Okay, so till the time my data is not getting downloaded and this progress bar is running, all the UI operation will be blocked. Okay, so to avoid that, what we did, we used one thread, and we are going to take care of connecting to the URL with the open HTTP URL connection class, and getting the data, converting the data. Because see, here you can see there's a lot of thing going inside this thread. The first and the foremost being, we are going to initializing the input stream, because this is where we're going to receive our data. Next is, so once the thread is doing something in the background, so it may return us the data, or it may return us the job that it has intended to perform. So where it will return? So it will return into this message object. So you can assume that your system can have multiple thread going in it. So like this is one thread we are looking here, and to every thread you will associate a message queue. What will be the job of that message queue? Is to get the data returned by that particular thread. So how many such message queue you had maintained? How would you identify those message queue? So you will going to make use of this message dot what and assign some unique value to it. So like message dot what means this is my first queue, which is tied to the first thread. So likewise, if you have multiple message queue tied to your thread, so you can say message dot what equal to true by initializing one more message object. Or if you have multiple threads running, then you can assign to every thread a message object like this, which will be assigned some ID. So later on, you can work upon with that particular corresponding message by passing the message ID. So as of now, this is just only one message queue we have, so it's not even required. But for you to know that this is how we work with the different message queue which is tied to the thread, so we have to go by this this attribute of this message object, that is message dot what equal to some value. Okay, so now what we will do, so once the message queue is also nahi kiya. Once the message queue is also tied to this thread, now we will try our main functionality, carrying out a main functionality inside this try catch block, which will going to look upon this URL. So first it will try to establish the URL connection with the help of HTTP open URL object, and then it will going to get all the data stream data which is going to be received from this URL into this input stream reader. And if the input stream reader has successfully got some instance, some handler to this data, then it will try to perform the decoding of that, because it's an image. Okay, and what we are receiving is nothing but the input stream. Okay, so we have to convert or decode this stream into something which is known as bitmap. So we may go with this method, bitmap factory. Okay, so already we had initialized one object which is of type bitmap, which is initially set to null, and we're calling upon bitmap factory dot decode stream and passing this input stream object. Okay, so now at this point we have our data decoded in the form of bitmap, but you cannot directly send it to our handler class where you have seen that it is getting it set to image view. So before that we have to do one step, that is we have to first create a bundle object and pass it like a bundle. Okay, so while doing so, we are assigning a key and a value pair to this function like put parcelable. So here this bundle object would prepare this bitmap as like one parcelable object and then send it. Okay, or you may say that then this message object will be set to this data which has been tied into bundle object, or rather you can say the message object wants the data to be of the form of a bundle object. So that's the reason we had to use this bundle object instance, and we have to put it in the form of a parcelable data and say message dot set data to this bundle object. Okay, and what else? Then we are closing a connection. Our job is done. So once a job is done and we are done everything without having any exception, then what we'll do? We'll going to send this message object which was tied to this thread. So thread has done its job of getting the URL connection, then decoding the data, then parsing it, and then setting it back to the message and closing the connections. There are a lot of things happening behind the scene inside this thread. So now once the thread has done its job, it will say message handler dot send message and pass the message object. So what is this? How where from where this object is coming? So this object is coming from here, which has already been initialized to some task. Okay, so you're calling just upon this object and calling the method send message. Okay, so when you say send message, so here you have a handle message. So whatever message you have sent, it will now be getting extracted inside the handle message function. Okay, so this thread will have to of course get run. So you define what is the job of this thread. The job of this thread is to uh, what you can say, connect to this remote URL, get the data in input stream, attach a queue, message queue to it, and do all this thing. Okay, and once the thread is defined, you can call a method thread.start, so which will run in and not going to block this UI operations of yours. Okay, and once the data has been downloaded, you will going to dismiss the dialog box, and alternatively what you can do, just to make sure whether everything has been cleaned up or not, you would also going to make use of this on destroy callback, and you will check if progress dialog is not equal to null, means it is still running or it is still showing on the UI. So you can also check upon this is showing method, and then you will purposely, or you can say deliberately, dismiss this progress dialog box by saying progress dialog dot dismiss. So if suppose still the progress dialog is running at the time when this activity is supposed to be killed or destroyed, so you can make sure that at the time when your activity is getting destroyed, this progress dialogues has also got dismissed, just to make just to provide you can say pleasant user experience. Okay, so this is how this piece of different functions that we wrote here does their corresponding jobs. So I hope it is understood. Any doubt in any of the functions that you want me to go back and explain or repeat? Yes? Yes or no? Yes, students, any doubt? Have you understood the code?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if it had been simply fetching the HTML content, so you can just simply go by this way of writing the code, okay, and getting the data into the string. But rarely would be the case that we go by fetching the HTML data. We may need some sort of image data to be downloaded or some file to be downloaded. So sometimes the data has to be passed into JSON type data. So all those we will see later. But with this, this example gives you the clear idea of how you can go about making use of internet services inside your application. And just one last thing for you to know, the as I already told कि HTTP URL connection is a part of Java package. तो आपको यहाँ पे जितने भी packages your HTTP URL connection से related दिखेंगे वो सारे Java के पैकेज है, ठीक है. एंड आवर एंड्रॉयड व्यू ऑब्जेक्ट के लिए हमारे पास व्यू ऑब्जेक्ट है, ठीक है, व्यू पैकेज है एंड्रॉयड डॉट व्यू डॉट व्यू. बट फॉर द वन विच वी हैड यूज फॉर थ्रेड, ओके, उसके लिए यहाँ पे आप देखो दिस आर द डिफरेंट पैकेजेस. सो व्हेन यू स्टार्ट राइटिंग दिस कोड and when you get red line, then which means that you have to import this package. So package name is android.os.bundle, and so basically the main package is android.os. तो os का package है ये जिसमें आपको bundle हैंडलर और मैसेज का एक्सेस मिलेगा. एंड फॉर बिटमैप, तो हमारे पास बिटमैप के लिए कौन सा पैकेज हमने यूज़ किया है? एज यू कैन सी हियर, ग्राफिक्स. ओके, android.graphics. And so with which we had got the functionality of getting the data into the bitmap. Okay. And progress dialog के लिए android.app. So ये कैसा होता है हम लोगों को, when we write code in Android IDE, Android Studio IDE, we don't have to really bother about what the package is. तो जैसे जैसे हम कोड लिखते हैं, packages gets import, but still we should know when we are writing. So we should know, because when you are writing in theory, you should know कि क्या packages import करना है, because on slide the packages discussion has not been done. So you should remember that this HTTP URL connection is of form or is of Java package, whereas connectivity manager belongs to android.net.connectivity manager. तो यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हो इतने सारे packages यहाँ import हुए. ठीक है, so I'll stop here and we'll take your attendance. Quickly call out your numbers, students.
Roll number 1 present, ma'am.
Roll number 3 present.
Roll number 8.
Roll number 5 present.
Roll number 6 present.
Roll number 12 present.
Next.
Roll number
19
21
present.
present, ma'am. 21
One.
present.
21.
22 present.
Ma'am,
Roll
19.
number 20 present.
24 present.
26 present.
27.
29 present.
30 present, ma'am.
31 present.
32 present.
33 present.
34 present.
35 present.
17 present.
37 present.
38 present.
39. 40 present.
42 present.
Ma'am, 36 present.
Ma'am, 46 present.
Yes,
47
next
present.
number.
48 present.
49
Ma'am, 46 present. Ma'am, 10 is
present.
also
Present.
present.
Just wait, student. Let me finish this 45 to 49. I'm not able to hear properly. 45,
47
47.
present.
48.
49.
50.
I'm 47 present.
हाँ तो किया है ना present.
51 ma'am.
52.
53, ma'am.
55.
58.
54.
56 present.
Yes.
60 present.
Ma'am, 56.
59 present, ma'am.
69 present, ma'am.
69 पहले आता है कि 61 पहले आता है, मुझे ये बताओ.
62 present, ma'am.
61 नहीं है, absent है.
हाँ मैम, 63 present.
62 भी absent है.
62 present, ma'am.
हाँ, 64 to 70.
64 present. ma'am.
69.
67.
64 present. ma'am.
70. Not there. And Rabia, you always
10
give
present.
your attendance very late.
Ma'am.
Rabia,
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, actually I unmute, but it takes like 1 minute to unmute.
Okay.
Ma'am, 10 has written in the chat.
Why to always write in the chat box? Why can't say?
Ma'am, she's having issues with her mic, ma'am. Ma'am, my phone was not unmuting. Now it's unmuted.
ज्योति तुम सबसे पहले अटेंडेंस दे दिया करो अनम्यूट करके, तुम्हारा माइक का इशू हमेशा रहता है ना, so you try doing your attendance before. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
ठीक है स्टूडेंट, you can leave.